Good evening, I'm Gerg Cahiles sitting in for Pinky Web. Tonight, we ask the questions, we tackle the issues, we clarify matters, and we get on point. In the 2023 World Risk Index, the Philippines takes top spot among nearly 200 countries most vulnerable to disasters due to climate change. The recent storm and flooding and landslides that struck the country are more than enough proof of this. Homes are destroyed, livelihoods are erased, lives are lost. Both government and non-government organizations have repeatedly called for action against climate change. For many years, urban planners have repeatedly offered suggestions on how to deal with the weather and prevent disasters. But can we catch up with nature? Let's get on point with Dr. Mahar Lagmay, Executive Director of the UP NOAA Center, and architect Paulo Alcazaren, urban designer and environmental planner. Good evening, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Evening. Thanks for inviting.
All right, sir, let's put things in context. Firstly, Dr. Lagmay, have you seen significant changes in the weather in the past maybe 20 to 30 years? Are there patterns that we're seeing, or have we seen this before?
Oh yes, definitely. One of the predictions of climate scientists is that our storms will become more powerful, delivering stronger winds and dumping more rain that generates bigger floods. And we've been seeing it even in Metro Manila, I think, because, for example, we had Ondoy in 2009. That is considered as an event that happens only once every 180 years. So they call it as a return period, 180 rain return period. In 2024, we had Karina.
Yes.
And that is a one every 100-year rain return. And it spawned floods that devastated Marikina, large parts of Metro Manila. So instead of happening once every 100 years, it's happening once every 15 years.
Wow, that's very short, sir.
Yeah, so we even had Habagat 2012, Habagat 2013, Habagat 2014, 2018, and Ulysses. And it made Marikina River swell as well. And it generated lots of floods that had a lot of impact, lots of losses and damages to people, to communities in Metro Manila. So these are predictions of climate scientists that I've read in journal articles more than 10 years ago. And these are the things that we're seeing now.
And architect, can you tell us, for the past years, have we seen changes in terms of adaptation?
Well, the biggest change first we must realize is that our cities and towns have changed, have grown bigger. So there's been urban expansion in the last 20, 30 years that has doubled, tripled, quadrupled the size of our towns and cities. And the effect there is that you have much less open space to absorb what used to be absorbable. And all of our, we're paving over everything. So what happens is that all of this storm water goes into the drainage systems, which was designed for a situation 50 years ago, that you're able to absorb a lot of the storm water just in open ground. Now they all are channeled into the drains whose capacities was meant for 100-year storms. Yeah. So that's the biggest change first.
Kumbaga po, there's not much change in terms of engineering and interventions in the past. Sabi nyo nga.
The interventions are always there. It's just that we're playing catch up and we don't adjust the capacities of the drainage systems or introduce other correctives to urban expansion that could absorb this stormwater, which is now getting worse and worse.
Hindi proactive, kumbaga.
Yes. And of course, the biggest change is not just what we find in our towns and cities, it's where the stormwater comes from, which is the hills and the mountains, the uplands. So from the watersheds, it flows down because there's no more trees to help stop and absorb all of the rainwater.
Dr. Lagmay, let's talk about Christine. Because
about
Christine, sir.
Christine.
Yes,
okay.
And recently the effect was seen in different parts of the country, particularly Bicol region and southern Luzon. And were you surprised that the massive effect was like that? Or kumbaga, na-predict naman natin to, hindi lang nagawa ng action.
That's right. The effects of Christine, it's a cyclone.
Yeah.
Okay, but the cyclone itself does not kill. We should be prepared for the hazards brought about by the cyclone. These are the hazards called as strong winds, floods, rain-triggered landslides, and storm surges. Now, if we are just to prepare for an incoming storm, then you're underprepared. You have to prepare for the hazards.
Yeah.
And that's called risk knowledge. And people should know about the hazards in terms of looking at maps. And the maps are called as hazard maps. And it's the business of hazards mapping, not just to identify the hazards, but also to identify the safe places for evacuation and development of communities. So we have these maps. So when there's a warning, people should know where to go. And if they don't go there in those places nearby, which are always there, they're everywhere. When we mapped out the entire country, there's probably about 40%, 35% safe, quote-unquote, safe places. So when there's a warning, the warning was good. The agencies predicted that there will be strong rains in the Bicol area, in the western part of Batangas. But I guess the LGUs and the people did not know where to go. So it's sad that that is happening, considering that there are available maps that points to areas that are safest in the community.
But if
Yes,
I
sir.
may,
Yeah, sure.
Doc, the problem is most Filipinos are map illiterate. They cannot read maps, right? Compared to 50 years ago when everybody was taught in school basic geography.
Yes.
They learn how to read maps, they learn how to read topography. Ngayon, they just depend on Waze or on Google, and they have no spatial awareness.
Yeah, okay.
So it's very hard to communicate something that they cannot read.
But how about LGU, sir? I'm sure they can read maps and they can, work on it. What's happening?
Our experience is that a lot of the officials in the LGUs have difficulty reading the maps.
Okay.
Yeah, that is something that we need to work on. So in a people-centered early warning system, it's not just the monitoring of the government agencies. We must develop risk knowledge. We must have good risk knowledge. There must be good monitoring, good equipment to monitor severe weather and the hazards. There needs to be good communication, and the people need to be capacitated. I think that what you're saying about reading maps is part of capacity building of the people. That is an assignment for all of us. It's not just government that needs to do these things. It's everyone.
Some NGOs help in capacity building, and what they use are they make scale models made of cardboard. So yung mga stakeholders nila, the LGU, barangay, they teach them basic mapping, and then they build the topography of their district or region using just plain corrugated board. It's very, very simple. And then they can appreciate that the water flows down that hill, will cause these landslides, will cause these floods. But that's one way to transfer the capacity of map reading.
Architect, I would like you to comment on the areas devastated by Christine. Let's say Naga, Bicol area. What can you say about the urban planning, sir?
Of course, all of our secondary cities are growing or expanding. So if you look at Naga 20, 30 years ago, the amount of urban expansion has tripled or quadrupled. You have new subdivisions, you have a population, of course, is increasing, business is increasing. Then you have a lot of big box commercial developments. These are the malls and these are the warehouses. And the tendency is just to pave over everything. So you have hektarya to na nilalatagan ng concrete, which is a pervious. Does not allow absorption of the rainwater. So all of the rainwater just flows out to the street, which is the main way of getting drainage water. Yeah. And then they go to the very small drainage culverts that are provided, because it has not taken care of this planned large developments.
All right, sir, we will continue our discussion in a few minutes. So we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more of our discussion with Dr. Mahar Lagmay and architect Paulo Alcazaren. Welcome back. You're watching On Point. Still with us, Dr. Mahar Lagmay and architect Paulo Alcazaren. Now, sir, going back to our discussions earlier, you talked about capacity building, sir, and education. So, you started Project NOAA, the hazard maps, etc., sir. How has it developed over years?
Well, we're still doing our work, but not on a national scale. We help LGUs, those who would like to seek our help. We've helped about probably 30 to 40 cities and municipalities all over the country over the span of, I think, 8 years. It's quite difficult to do. We help them craft their comprehensive land use development plans. We help them draft their climate change action plans, as well as disaster risk reduction management plans, as well as other plans associated with the development plans of the community. And I think that's very important because if these plans are risk-informed and science-based, it can translate to projects, programs, and activities that will be good for the community, which will follow the vision of the stakeholders in the community, what they want, even considering the effects of climate change.
Maraming LGUs po ba yung lumalapit sa inyo? Or,
Marami. Oo, maraming LGUs, and we welcome those who want to seek our help so that we can make their plans risk-informed and science-based.
Okay. Sir, you did the study about the sinking cities. No? Can you talk more on that? Kasi apparently you looked at different areas. Metro Manila, Metro Cebu, Metro Davao, Iloilo, Legazpi City.
That's right. We've been doing this since the early 2000. I think the first report that we made was in 2003, although Kelvin Rodolfo did work in the 1990s about ground subsidence. We identified in Metro Manila during that time Kamanaba as a hotspot for ground subsidence. And the reason for the ground subsidence, we think, is because of excessive groundwater extraction. Yung mga deep well, bomba, no? That was in Kamanaba, Caloocan, Malabon, Nabotas, and Valenzuela.
Valenzuela, yes.
So, ang nangyari, nung tinignan namin ulit ngayon, 2020, from 5 to 6 centimeters na subsidence, it's now less than 1.
Okay, what happened?
So that means that we can do something about the problem if we use science and identify where the hot spots are, where the problem areas are. But the problem is there are still many parts of Metro Manila that have excessive ground subsidence. Like, for example, in Bulacan. It's phenomenal. The rates are about 10.6 centimeters per year. So that means that in 10 years, that will be more than a meter of ground sinking. We need to address that as well. And that kind of report is a report that should tell officials, mayors, as well as national government officials to do something about it. We looked at Iloilo, we looked at Cebu, we looked at Legazpi and Davao. The rates are not as great as those found in Bulacan, but still, it's good to know that there's ground subsidence that's happening there, so that we can prevent as early as now worsening conditions of ground sinking.
Mr. Alcazaren, of course, you were advocating for, adaptability siguro po ng ating LGUs, siguro ng private sector din, in terms of climate change, sir. Marami na ba ang humihingib din ng tulong sa inyo? Or yung designs po ba ninyo na naging viral in the past, nakikita nyo ba siya na ginagamit na? Or
marami na, pero ang problema may konting gastos na involved.
Okay.
Of course, if you want to have climate change adaptation, you have to spend for it. The infrastructure is additional to standard culverts and drainage. So if you want to put cisterns, yung mga tangke sa ilalim, kagaya ng BDC, they spend a lot of money to provide for that. Babe Singson put that in because he knew that area could not hold the flood waters pag nagkaroon ng event. Kasi pupunta lahat yan sa kalayaan.
Correct.
So then they computed how much that was and then they overcompensated for it. Kaya malaki yung system nila. Pero malaking gastos. But it is flood-free. So if you try to convince yung mga LGUs na konti lang ang budget, mapupunta, itutulak nila sa DPWH. DPWH will do it if the funds are also channeled to them. So it has to be a political push na ibabak ng congressman or senator or whatever for those interventions.
But you know what? I'm looking at the climate change budget of the government, and for this year, 2024, climate change and disaster risk reduction, that's over $500 billion pesos.
Where does it go?
Yes, sir. Exactly. My question, napupunta po ba sa tamang proyekto ang pondo ng bayan?
DPWH has flood control programs, which is mainly based on hard interventions. Ibig sabihin, they will make a larger drainage. They will channelize. Well, this is controversial, yung pagka channelize ng mga rivers, nilalagyan ng concrete sides para hindi mag-erode yung banks, but that actually does not work. So the DPWH has a limited menu of solutions, and they should better be open to other types of solutions that involve detention and retention ponds, damming up of the waters before they flow into the water system. Kasi dumadami nga yung tubig baha, it's coming down the mountain at a faster rate, so you have to detain it before it comes down until such time na kayang i-absorb ng river, creek, and drainage system ng cities. And all of our towns and cities are at the bottom of the slopes.
Yes.
We have very few towns and cities that are in the uplands. But even Baguio floods, but that's another problem. Diba?
But, you know, I was thinking sabi ko kung lalaki ang budget mo sa UP NOAA, baka mas marami kang matutulungan ng LGU, ano po?
Palagay ko, kasi tama yung sinasabi ni architect no? Hindi lahat ng solution kasi concrete. Hindi lahat hard infrastructure.
Yes, hard infra.
There's such a thing as soft solutions. You plan the community well. Make room for the river, preserve the floodplains as parks, the easements, don't occupy them so that merong dadaanan yung tubig. Merong retention, no? Before it goes down, nagpapand muna siya doon. After all, floodplains are there because it's part of the river. So if you can plan the community well, gamitin mo muna yung nature-based solutions. You can plant, reforest yung mountains natin. Mag-isip tayo ng mga asphalt na nag-absorb ng water.
Impervious, yung butas-butas.
Yung mga impervious, Although, mga small roads yun, hindi pwedeng highways. Kasi,
pero yung malalaking parking lot na I mentioned kanina, pwede nating pervious.
So, ang mangyayari, if you plan it well, you look for nature-based solutions, tapos pag merong residual risk, doon ka intervention ng hard infrastructure.
And we could pass laws.
Yes.
We could pass laws na requiring towns and cities a proportion of open space, parks and open space to build up areas na hindi lahat konkreto. Dapat may mga parke tayo, mga kahit yung mga plaza, pwede natin gawing absorptive. Diyan papasok yung pagka-sponge niya. So may mga sistema na we can put underneath the concrete that can absorb flood waters when they come.
Okay, let's talk more about the solutions later. We're taking a short break again. Stay tuned. This is On Point. Welcome back. You're watching On Point. I'm Gerg Cahiles. Still with us, Dr. Mahar Lagmay of the UP NOAA Center and urban designer and environmental planner, architect Paulo Alcazaren. Sir, we're talking about solutions earlier. And the President mentioned na gusto niya ayusin ang flood control master plan ng bansa. Have you seen an example of this master plan na aayusin?
Well, meron ako nakita sa dyaryo dati, I think in 2015, and we wrote an article about it. Yun nga, maganda sana na hindi puro ma-consult din yung mga ibang mga researchers, scientists in doing the master plan. And it should not always be, again, hard infrastructure. So tignan muna din natin yung mga ibang possible solutions like yung sinasabi ni Paulo. And then after that, we do it. And also, yung aming grupo sa University of the Philippines, if there's a master plan, we can check it if it's going to work or not. No? Kasi we have powerful computers. We know the physics of the flow of water. We can model it. We can build scenarios. Put in the master plan and check whether it's going to work or not.
And exactly, parang, well, for this year kasi sir, ang climate change budget is 1 trillion pesos.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And talking about that amount of money, marami siyang magagawa if mailalagay sa tama ang pondo.
Pero yung problema, yung flood control master plan, depende yan sa larger overall land use master plan ng Pilipinas from the national level, and then provincial, and then city. Our problem is that our National Land Use Act is not yet in effect. And so hindi makascade yung National Physical Framework Plan to the provincial framework plans down to the local. So walang vertical integration. Gumagawa sila ng mga plano, hindi naman integrated yung ano. And then when you try and address all of these problems, as Babe Singson said, when he tried to do it, you have to talk to about 30 agencies just to implement a simple, not simple, no, but the stormwater or flood control master plan. So it's a very, very complicated situation.
So kailangan i-streamline, sir, yung proseso.
You start with the land use is always the one that drives everything. Now, land use is driven what the development master plan is from NEDA. So you have the economic. And then from the economic, you have the physical. But the physical must be based on the realities on the ground. And so you have to have that before you can overlay yung drainage, transportation, power, all of the layers na kailangan ng master plan for development.
Naku, budget season pa naman, and I'm sure the Senate will deliberate and talk about the budget for 2025, and hopefully nakikinig sila ngayon and ma-invite kayo sa mga hearings, no?
Well, yan yung problema nga, is if a trillion pesos is on the line for and you're still doing the same thing over and over again, which we know doesn't work, and you're not integrating, then all of that will go to waste.
Sir,
down the drain.
Sa experience, sir, I'm sorry. Sa experience nyo, how long does it take for a master plan to be created at siguro para ma-implement ng tama?
Well, we did the drainage master plan for Quezon City, and it took us how long? About 2.5 years. It's just for Quezon City. So what we did was we modeled the surface runoff as well as the drainage capacity. So we integrated both, and I think it's the first that this has been done for a city in Metro Manila.
In a while.
Yeah, in a while. So that involved a lot of computing power and a lot of researchers to work on the problem. So we identified those places that clog, identified places that can be used as retention basins. In fact, we suggested that all of these basketball courts, in specific places, can have retention basins. Underneath. So
how long did it take you to finish that plan?
About 2.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And hopefully that the rest of Metro Manila can follow suit. The cities in Metro Manila can follow suit so that it will be integrated. Hindi yung isa lang. Kasi these floodwaters don't recognize administrative boundaries. So it should be integrated by watershed.
Let me echo that concern is because we're 17 LGUs, but when you look at the Metro Manila from the air, there's no boundary. And so the floodwaters won't stop from Quezon City to San Juan or to Pasig City. And the reason why it's difficult to do the master planning is wala tayong maps again. So ideally, in planning, first in data gathering as in planning, you have to input it into a base. That base we now use in modern planning is a GIS system, Geographic Information System. All modern cities use that. It makes it easier to input yung data collected by the scientists for the modeling that will go into making yung master plan natin. Kokonti lang sa ating mga lungsod at bayan yung may GIS. We should really be completely GIS nationwide. Right, Doc?
Yeah, right. And if I may add, sa disaster risk reduction mga discussions, and it's quite well known. The disaster risk reduction and management is best achieved na maganda if you make use of local resources including local capacity. No? So kapag palagi tayong humihiram from outside, di ba, hindi sustainable eh. Mas sustainable kung nandito, ginagamit natin yung mga Filipinos and we invest ourselves. No? Yung Project NOAA was the first non-ODA Overseas Development Assistance project of that scale, which was parang over the span of 5 years, 6.3 billion pesos. So that was the first. And I think the last, no, na ganun kalaking ticket. And we always depend on foreign aid and loans. No? Not that I'm saying that it's bad, but I mean, we have to make use of local resources, local capacity.
After all, we can.
We can.
Yes, we can.
And we have the
consultants,
capacity,
but we're
no?
not called in. Or if we're called in on on a secondary role.
Bakit kaya, sir?
You ask the government. We have to ask the government that question. Well, it is because the funds come from outside and their agenda is use our consultants. But there's a problem there in bringing people in from the outside. There's a learning curve before they can be useful.
Yeah.
And then they rely on the secondary on the other consultants locally, and it takes time. And nandito na kami lahat eh. So it's much faster if you retain the services of professional Filipino scientists and planners.
And if I may add, ang gagaling ng mga Filipino scientists and engineers.
Well, you have here with us. That's why we're talking to you kasi kayong experts. And tama na yung sinasabi niyo po, ano? Kumbaga, let's utilize our, local talents and siguro.
There are 7,000 environmental planners in the Philippine Institute of Environmental Planning, and a little less scientists in the geosciences.
Yes,
but there are, of course, thousands.
If you'll be asked, nasaang estado po tayo ngayon? Are we still, naghahabol pa ba tayo? Or are we on the right track already of, being more proactive? Kasi ang dami naman nangyayaring disaster and hazard sa bansa natin.
On the right track in terms of reducing risk?
Yes, probably, sir.
Well, I'll put it this way. Sabi mo kanina sa introduction, we are ranked in the World Risk Index as number 1. Not just for this year, but for the 3rd consecutive year. So we have the same hydrometeorological, mga severe weather hazards as Japan. But Japan is number 24. We are number 1. So why is that? So they're doing something that we are not doing, perhaps, and that's the reason why the world is looking at us as number 1, despite the fact that we have the same hazards. So, anong dapat natin gawin? I think we have to be smarter. We have to make use of whatever is available in the country to make it to show to the world that we can put down this risk index, be at par with Japan.
Mr. Alcazaren, please.
Yes, it's infrastructure. It's planning, and then it's infrastructure, but infrastructure that comes from proper planning, which comes from, at the very base of it, the studies made by the scientists and the data that is gathered. Dapat you start with good data and good input. You make the master plan. You implement with continuous infrastructure. And then you address the problem.
Dapat siguro mag-tandem na kayong dalawa, no? You have the data, you have the study, and the planning, etc. And the government, of course. In terms of implementation, kasi nasa kanila ang pera ng taong bayan. Anyway, thank you very much po, Dr. Lagmay and Mr. Alcazaren, for being with us tonight. And that will be all. And that's On Point. Join us again tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. here on BNC, the Billionario News Channel. On behalf of Pinky Web, I'm Gerg Cahiles. Thank you for watching.